Welcome to another episode 28 of Rewind Heroes. I'm your co-host, Greg Compton.
And I'm your other co-host, Dan Gaines. This is going to be your video podcast where Greg and I talk everything in movies, music, television, everything that Greg and I find cool. And can I just say, welcome back, everybody. Happy New Year. It's 2017, and we're excited to be here.
We are so glad for a new year. I mean,
Yes.
2016 took Bowie, it took Prince, it took our favorite princess, Princess Leia.
Horrible.
So we're done with that, but there were a lot of really good things that came out of 2016, and that's kind of what we want to talk about, a little roundup of just our favorites.
Absolutely. Our
top 20, I guess. We each picked 10, and we probably have, I think, 3 or 4 overlapping ones.
Shocking.
Yeah, so let's, you want to get started with that?
I don't see any reason why not.
All right, let's do our year-in review. So, like we said, there's a ton of great things that came out in 2016. Let's start with probably the biggest one that we both share. Dan, what would that be?
That would be the #1 movie in the domestic box office.
Trolls.
Damn it, I must have looked at the wrong numbers. Rogue One, a Star Wars story. This thing had it all from the beginning to end. It was the first spin-off, first standalone Star Wars film, and for me and Greg, it delivered on so many levels. Total fun. If you haven't went and seen it, you just don't have any interest in going, because what are you doing with your lives? Get out to the theater, because this thing was awesome.
Exactly, it was great. I mean, you can't say enough about it. It's another Star Wars film. It delivers. You can check out our whole review on it, but it's a phenomenal film. And I heard that the big Vader scene that everyone talks about was a reshoot.
I
that
heard
was
the same.
An additional piece. So.
And everyone was worried the reshoots were because the film was terrible. It was just because they were making it that much better.
Exactly. Well, let's go with number 2, which would be, I think, Captain America Civil War, the unofficial third Avengers film.
Yep.
You got your first look at Spider-Man, as it's done now with Marvel Studios. Just phenomenal. So much humor. I thought it was the best Captain America film yet. I felt like the second one was great, too. It was more like another Bourne movie is what that felt like.
It made Captain America relevant.
Exactly. But it was wonderful. We had our points that bugged us about, but for the most part, we loved it. We're looking forward to Infinity War. So if you haven't seen that, check it out. It's actually on Netflix now.
Yeah, I saw that too.
Yeah.
Which is
so,
awesome.
and if it's been a while since you've seen it, check it out again. Dan, speaking of Netflix?
Well, and before we do that, I just wanted to say the other thing is it's great that we're talking 2017 because Captain America Civil War does a great job of now getting you excited about Spider-Man Homecoming, which is this coming summer.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. But yeah, speaking of Netflix, we all raved about this nostalgia look back at an 80s retro series, Stranger Things. I don't think there was a more talked about, more buzzed about TV series this entire year. And man, did it have everything. I mean, it was it had so many nods. It was everything you remembered growing up, watching stuff during the 80s, and it's everything that we love, it's everything we talk about. So.
Oh yeah, I mean, from the D&D stuff to the floating Millennium Falcon, all the one-liners, just, it was beautiful. And, just riding your bike until dark. I mean, there's stuff that I miss from my childhood that this thing nailed, and I loved it so much. I cannot wait for season 2.
It felt like watching us in our childhood. Speaking of us.
Yeah, so another show that Dan started right off the bat, I just picked it up, was This Is Us. My wife and I just caught up on this. I mean, just kind of binged through until we're caught up. Phenomenal writing on this show. Yeah. People compared it to Parenthood. I even think you did. I say it blows Parenthood away because there were character storylines in Parenthood that I thought were kind of immature and unrealistic. Others were great. But this one, I have not seen a weak spot. And the dialogue from every character, there's so many monologues almost that just almost bring you to tears the way they're written. The way they put the storylines together, the acting. If you have not seen This Is Us, please do yourself a favor and check this thing out.
And that's what I was going to say. If you're not sure about it, you're like, you know what are these guys talking about? This isn't really in line with the type of stuff I typically watch.
Yeah.
Just watch the pilot episode and watch it all the way through. And if you can get done with that episode and have no interest, then this show isn't for you. But I feel like you're going to have a hard time not wanting to watch that second episode.
That's true. I mean, a lot of things we talk about are sci-fi, fantasy, action films. And, a big part of that is because these are the films on news sites that have updates that talk about these things. A lot of shows like this kind of sneak in, or certain films you don't get this. But we love a lot of this kind of stuff. It's kind of nice to add that in. But speaking of sci-fi, something I haven't seen but you really loved and I can't wait to see.
Yes, Arrival, starring Amy Adams. And this movie, I mean, wow. Every list, so we're kind of entering the award season, which I love.
Yeah.
And I was kind of surprised. So this film, for science fiction, you don't see it much, it's on every list as a contender for Best Picture. And that to me speaks volumes on what kind of movie this is. If you're thinking this is another alien invasion, been there, done that, no, not happening. This movie actually comes out on Blu-ray on February 14th. You have to do yourselves a favor. This has got to be one of the best science fiction films I've seen in the last 10 years. And I know that's saying a lot, but it's incredible. So you need to check that one out.
I will definitely check that out.
Kind of in the sci-fi world, what else you got for us?
I was a big fan of 10 Cloverfield Lane. Now that's on my list. I loved it. Of course, part of it is Dan Trachtenberg's first. It's his directorial debut for feature film, and I followed him on the Totally Rad show for years as a host, and loved that show, and kind of inspired me to want to do this when you mentioned wanting to do a podcast.
Yeah,
that was the show that came to mind. So when he did a film, obviously I listened to this guy review things for years. So I mean, I have that going into it, but I think it was masterful. I think John Goodman's acting is beyond phenomenal in that film. I think it's Oscar worthy. It's got Hitchcock thrills and setups, I think. I mean, it's the most like that in a long time.
Yeah.
The ending can be a little off-putting for some people, depending on if you like sci-fi or not. But I definitely think the tension is amazing and would highly recommend it.
And just to piggyback on that, you do know there's another Cloverfield anthology film coming out. We don't even know what it is yet.
Oh, yeah.
Who knows? Maybe we've already seen the trailer and don't even know that's actually the Cloverfield.
That's very much. That was the thing, too. This took you by shock because you didn't know that this would be tied to that world until that trailer, like the title came. It was kind of listed under something, I think The Bunker or something like that.
Yeah.
So that was a huge thing. So on more lighthearted movies.
So how are you going to transition to that?
Yeah.
So for me, the next one I have to list. This was a great year for animation. Disney, to me, knocked it out of the park with Zootopia and Moana. But for me, the one that's top of the list that was a total thrill ride was Finding Dory.
Oh, yeah.
Going into it, I was like, do we really need a sequel to Finding Nemo, 13 years later?
Right.
But I left the theater screaming, absolutely yes. This thing was an absolute blast. It was like going to the amusement park, getting on the ride, and you couldn't stop smiling.
Exactly.
You laughed. It had all the visuals. It's amazing what they can do with animation. But in the root of it, it's just a great story that Disney does a good job of telling.
Yeah, the nature of the character made it so they could write a sequel that didn't feel forced. It felt completely natural.
Totally fresh.
By using her lack of memory. And so that's what I loved about it. It didn't feel like a forced sequel. It felt completely natural even after all these years. My kids loved it. Probably their favorite movie of the year.
Was it?
They loved Moana too. I mean,
awesome.
But they just keep talking about Hank.
Yeah.
Like Hank
he was
Hank's
great.
the man. Hank is the man.
He was great. Ed O'Neill, he did an awesome job.
Exactly. Now, we've been talking a lot of movies, right? Another thing that I would talk about is a band that I love, Johnny Swim. Their second album, Georgia Capone, came out. Phenomenal. Sometimes you hear a sophomore slump with musicians with their albums. This thing, it's right up there with their first main release. I mean, they also had an EP before that, so it's not their second release, but their second full release. Just check these guys out. It's a husband and wife duo, just phenomenal harmonies. I really cannot say enough about them. I've talked about them before on this show. But this album is great, and it's got upbeat songs, and it's got some that are just tearjerkers, because Georgia Capone is a place where her parents used to take her as a kid when they would go on vacations, and her mom passed recently, who was Donna Summer, famous musician actually, passed, and so this album's kind of a tribute to her family. So you hear that song, and when I saw them in concert, they talked about the particular song, Georgia Capone. They'd started to write, and they were recording it in their home studio, just the two of them, and he thought the song was almost done, but she kind of motioned to keep going, and she added more to it. And this is the take that they used, and it's one of those songs, like, when they sang it, I think everyone knowing the story, then they heard the song, and she almost couldn't get through it when she sang the song. So it's one of those that just wow, really
very
hits
powerful.
you in the feels. But then there's so many uplifting songs on this and fun tunes. It's definitely check out Johnny Swim's Georgia Capone or their first album too.
That's awesome.
So yeah.
Well, it's going to be hard for me to follow that because that sounds a lot more deep than what I'm getting ready to get into. But for me, this was one of those movies that they come along every now and then. It's different than what we've seen, and that's got to be Deadpool. Do I think it was the greatest movie I've ever seen? Absolutely not. But it was one of those movies that was memorable because you had never had an R-rated superhero film. We're used to seeing the X-Men and the Avengers, but to have a character dropping the F-bomb and beating people's heads in.
Yeah.
And then actually breaking the fourth wall and talking to the audience. It was unlike anything you'd seen. And I left that movie just really excited about the future of not only the Deadpool franchise, but what doors is this going to open?
That's true.
This year we've got Logan coming out, which looks phenomenal.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see now that they know they can make these smaller scale, low budget superhero films, what kind of stories are going to come out of that?
Yeah, and that's one of those weird ones. Like I think we talked about before. Ironically, I didn't even like the movie.
Yeah,
it was weird.
right.
I didn't like it because I don't know. But the thing I did like about it was the breaking the fourth wall. And again, the fact that it was successful means that they can take chances with other movies, like a more serious line with Logan, things like that.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I just wanted more wisecracks from Deadpool versus just cursing all the time. That was my take, so I thought that the writing was a little lazy on there, but there are other parts that were inventive.
Yeah.
So I will give it that.
Okay. Well, what about another hero for us?
Another hero, I thoroughly enjoyed Doctor Strange.
Yeah, it was good.
I was a huge fan of Doctor Strange. Some people said too much exposition, things of that nature. I loved it. I thought Benedict Cumberbatch did a phenomenal job. And we've talked about this before on our episode from it, just the effects they pulled off.
Oh, it was visually unbelievable.
Yeah, blew my mind as an editor. I mean, I walked out of there kind of just like, I don't know, brains coming out of the ears, just melting because I couldn't figure out how they pulled that off.
How the hell they do this?
Yeah, that was a phenomenal film. Really a fun ride, and it was again a total different take.
Yes, Marvel's done a great job with that.
Yeah, you're bringing in magic and something completely different from a guy that really wasn't given powers as much, just learning how to tap into a spiritual realm, which was an interesting thing. I think sometimes people forget about that. It's not like he was given powers. He just had his hands broken, so he couldn't be a surgeon anymore.
Right.
And kind of came across this. I thought that was kind of cool.
And like most Marvel films, like we talked earlier, it does a great job of getting you excited about the future of the character.
Yeah.
And they just announced that Doctor Strange will have not just a cameo, but will play a pivotal role in Thor Ragnarok. So that excites me as well.
Which, is made a kind of, it's already set up in some of the extra scenes. Without getting into what those are from Doctor Strange. So I thought that was cool. Okay, well, again, shifting from movies, you had something else.
Yeah, so we talked movies, had some music. I'm actually going to recommend a book, one of my favorites from 2016, Star Wars Bloodline. This seemed fitting. It really, truly was my favorite of the year. I'm a big, no joke, I was getting ready to make a real big announcement. I'm a Star Wars freak.
What?
And I know, I can't believe I just now broke that news. But this book it's particularly special for me because it does follow General Leia Organa. The whole book is from her perspective. It takes place about 6 years before The Force Awakens. So you kind of get to see what was going on in her personal life, in the Senate, and it's told through her eyes. But what's really special about it is Rian Johnson, the director of Episode 8, actually contributed to this novel as well.
Okay.
So it's definitely worth checking out, and if for any other reason, to get to see a Leia story while Carrie Fisher was still on this earth.
Yeah, that's...
I know.
Gosh, I know. Postcards from the Edge of Alderaan.
I'm telling you. Oh, man.
No, she's going to be missed. I was really wondering what's going to hit people harder is almost a year from now, you're going to see the next episode. And she's going to have a good part of it. And it feels are going to come back. They're all going to come back.
I agree.
And I'm curious how 9 is going to be affected by that.
We can do a whole episode on that.
Yeah. Well, I've been a music guy, so I should mention more music,
please.
right? And I've mentioned this one before, but a band that I love, the Dirty Governors, disbanded about a year ago. This year they came out with, hey, we're releasing a live album for our farewell concert. So it was kind of that nice taste of it, and to get that and get like the Loving Cup, which is a Rolling Stones song off Exile on Main Street, which is a phenomenal album. They do a cover of it, which I hope Mick Jagger gets a chance to hear it.
Yeah.
Because it's phenomenal.
Cool.
So good. I got you a copy of it.
Yeah, they were great.
That whole thing is just phenomenal. Check it out. Dirty Governors, rock and roll for the people. Best heart in any live album I've heard in the last few years.
That's cool.
Anyway, speaking of musical
I was going to
things.
say, so this is another one of those. You guys are all thinking, seriously? But I got to put it on here. I just saw this film last week, and it's La La Land. It blew it out of the water in Golden Globes. It's probably going to knock every award out in the Academy Awards. And I got to tell you, I get it. Is it my favorite movie of the year? Absolutely not. But you cannot argue with how well done this thing was. I mean, the writing, the music, what it took just to pull this thing off. I mean, I can't tell you how many scenes I sat in awe thinking, how in the hell did they pull this off? It looked like a choreographer's nightmare in some scenes. But great storytelling and its core, and unbelievable performances by Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling.
I do want to check it out because I'm a music guy. I'd
Yeah,
love
I
to
think
see
you
it.
would really like it, and I think you'd appreciate it.
Yeah, and trying to bring back that musical stuff. I remember Hail Caesar, while I thought for Coen film had a really weird plot in the end.
Right.
But I don't know if you ever saw that.
I didn't see that one,
But
no.
so much of it takes place on a movie lot in that time period when they were making not only historical dramas but musicals.
If you like that kind of thing, that's what this is.
Oh, because it was great. They totally channeled that Busby Berkeley thing. They channeled in that, like a Tatum Channing as like sailor on leave. They do a whole scene in a bar, which is choreographed like that. And then they also had like this famous swimming things. Scarlett Johansson plays a character, and they do one of those scenes. And it was so cool to see a movie that's not playing off of it being a serious musical. It's kind of a
That is, yeah. I didn't actually make that connection, but as far as time period,
it's like kind of opened the doors for that. So I think that's really, really cool.
So what else you got?
I got an interesting book.
Okay.
Because it's non-fictional. Another book.
I like
I am quite the reader. It's called Tools of Titans by Tim Ferriss. He does an amazing podcast called The Tim Ferriss Show, where he interviews people looking for, it kind of falls in that realm of self-improvement, but it's interviewing people to figure out tips, tricks, things that made them successful, what makes them maybe an outlier to being successful in something.
Yeah.
He's written other books, 4-Hour Workweek, 4-Hour Chef, which is cool because I was like cooking book, which sounds weird, but it's using it. His big thing too is how to dismantle something to learn how to do it quickly. So if you want to learn a skill, dismantle it, figure out like the 20% that you would use 80% of the time. Like use that rule, but using it to master something quickly. And even had a show that you can get on iTunes where he's like learning how to do extreme driving in 24 hours of training.
Seriously?
So it's those kind of things. And so the cooking book was something he couldn't do, cook well. So he used that as, I'm going to apply everything to this and teach you how I dismantle things. I'm going to use cooking as the shell for it.
That's a cool concept.
Yeah. So he came out with this book, Tool of Titans, because he did the podcast, because he wanted to learn how to interview better, and he didn't want to write another book necessarily. He's interviewed, 200-300 people. Yeah. So he decided to take every interview and crunch them down to a couple pages of like gems from those interviews and came out with this book, Tool of Titans. There's like 700 pages, but I mean, they're not full pages, it's all. But I couldn't even remember everybody he interviewed, so I'm going to throw a few names out here. Why it's worth checking out. And you can check out, like, again, he's got the podcast, so you can hear these. Schwarzenegger, which was awesome. John Favreau, which was awesome. Laird Hamilton, Morgan Spurlock, Shaun White, Chase Jarvis, who's an awesome photographer if you've not followed his stuff. BJ Novak from The Office, who's a writer. Kevin Costner, Kevin Kelly of Wired, Rick Rubin, the music guy, Seth Rogen, Rainn Wilson, Jamie Foxx, Ed Norton, Mike Birbiglia, Robert Rodriguez, and then a whole bunch of people you don't know. I mean, the first third is all health-based, which I'm not a kettlebell lifter. I'm not doing a ketogenic diet. I don't care about that. But then you get to like the wealthy or the wise sections, and it's just all these just cool nuggets of wisdom from really important people and entertainers. And so I don't know. I just thought it's totally out of what we do, but it's something I read. I thought I could get a lot out of this. This is pretty awesome. Or the podcast. I mean, it's just kind of a cool thing. So check it out. Cool. It's way out there, but what else we got?
Well, I'm going to bring it back to kind of what the main theme of this has been is
and our show.
And our show.
Yeah.
But one thing you could say about 2016, I think many would agree, this was a weak summer. We had a lot of really disappointing movies that just didn't deliver. But I will say, as we've kind of entered the back half of the year, there have been a ton of very strong movies kind of going into this award season. Stronger than I think we've had in the last few years. So that's why my final film that I'm going to recommend would be Fences, starring and directed by Denzel Washington. This movie takes place kind of during the time period of segregation. And I'm telling you right now, it's a very character-driven film. The plot itself's simple in concept, but you cannot stop hinging on every word Denzel Washington delivers in this film. Him and Viola Davis, who I think is also one of the best in the business, they deliver performances that you forget at times that you're watching a film. You feel like you are a fly on the wall in their home, and it's just two people having a conversation. I'm telling you, it's two of the best performances I've seen that I even remember. And for their performances alone, it's worth checking this thing out. And I got to believe they're going to be right in the thick of things for all these awards coming up here in the next month or so.
That's awesome. I definitely want to check that one out. So I guess we have one more.
Yeah.
And I will put out there, I've talked about it before, but one of my favorite bands is o.a.r. of Revolution. I mentioned it mainly because this year they put out their double album celebrating 20 years. That's why it's double X.
Yeah.
And the first album is just kind of a great, our first disc is like a greatest hits basically, plus 2 new songs, which I think are phenomenal. And the second is just all live tracks of some of their other great hits, a lot of their earlier songs. I don't know. I just think it's awesome. So if you haven't really heard the band, it's a really good way to for a band to say, "Hey, I want to introduce ourselves to
it's a good idea.
the next generation or whatever." That's a great starting place.
Yep.
You know, there's some songs they might have left out here, but they're known for live performances, so you get the live versions.
Right.
You get a good taste of what the band is all about. And I think maybe more bands need to do something like that. I think that's pretty awesome.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah. So that rounds it out. There were so many other good things.
This was hard. I mean, I think we both sat down and wrote a list, and we could have just kept going.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been a tough year in 2016, but there's been a lot of good stuff that's came out.
Oh, and we were talking like, Birth of a Nation was good. You mentioned Moana. I mean, so many other things. There's just tons of, we just couldn't fit it all in. But yeah, I mean, there's good stuff out there. But let's bring on 2017.
Yeah, in 2017, as far as the film world goes, I can't tell you how excited I am. There's stuff getting ready to hit. There's stuff coming out right now. There's stuff coming out in March, and then it never lets up. There's a ton of stuff coming.
And so we'll hit that up with an episode coming up soon of what we're looking forward to in 2017. If by the time that comes out, if 1 or 2 we've already seen, we'll say, hey, we know this is good because we just saw it.
It's true.
So I think that pretty much sums up our review of 2016. Where can they find you on the interwebs?
Yeah, so please, again, follow us on Facebook. Make sure you like us on YouTube and share the video. We appreciate those shares. But if you're looking for me, I'm simply on Instagram, Twitter, and on Facebook at Dan Gaines. What about you?
You can find me on all those places too. On Twitter, it's gcompton007. So, there you have it. Until next time, be kind.
And please rewind.